Hello everyone, welcome back to the Zekko football channel. Newcastle United have lost 3-2 to Manchester City. It was a cracking game, but it also adds to a number of losses that Newcastle have sustained over the course of the last few weeks. In fact, in their recent form, they've only won 2 out of their last 10 games in all competitions. They've actually lost the remaining 8, and that is horrendous. It leaves them in a dismal 10th in the Premier League table after 21 games. Obviously not where they want to be, and there are some murmurs around Eddie Howe and his position at the club, and some concern, growing concern, understandably, from Newcastle fans that I've been speaking to about where the club is at and how they might turn their form around. And that's what this video is about, because I don't think they should be panicking at all, and I'm going to use this game against Man City, their most recent match, as a good example. Today we're going to be having a look at this game and why I don't think Newcastle should be panicking or worrying whatsoever, and there are greener times ahead, better times, and there is a light at the end of the tunnel. If you are new to the channel, please make sure that you subscribe, you like the video, and you turn on those notifications. But now, let's get into it. Okay, so Newcastle 2, Manchester City 3, Kevin De Bruyne, all of that, and it was a pretty spectacular game to watch. So if you haven't seen the goals, please do go check them out once you finish watching this. But please do go check them out, because it is a fantastic match, some fantastic goals, and if you are a football fan, you really do need to see them. The attacking momentum bar is something of a curious thing at times, because it doesn't really tell us a lot in this situation. We know that Man City are going to have a lot of the ball. We know that Newcastle are down to their bare bones in certain terms with their squad, and it's not a surprise that Man City are going to have most of the possession, but it does tell us a couple of things. It tells us where Newcastle managed to find some kind of layup into the game, some kind of a leg into the tie. And obviously Newcastle took advantage of the momentum they created with the first goal and went and got another. Let's have a look at the lineups, because I thought that to a man, this Newcastle United side were absolutely fantastic. Almiron and Anthony Gordon did a fantastic job of tracking back to help out Kieran Trippier and Dan Burn whenever Manchester City created overloads down the wings. And that's really what Man City's game plan was. They didn't want to go through the middle of the pitch. Instead, they utilised Doku and Phil Foden to go a little bit more narrow, and then used Gvardiol and Kyle Walker to really make those overlapping runs, creating the width through the fullbacks this time, leaving Ake and Diaz to really cycle possession around with Rodri to make sure they could try and break Newcastle down the flanks. Now, fortunately for Newcastle, Almiron and Anthony Gordon were very diligent in the way that they went about their work, and it meant that Man City struggled to really find a foothold in the match. In fact, the first goal came from Doku switching play round and allowing that quick change of momentum from left to right, giving them the opportunity to pass the ball and cross the ball into Bernardo Silva for that first goal. Let's have a look at the average positions, because these are interesting as well. As you can see, what I've mentioned, Almiron did a very good job of tracking back, and so did Anthony Gordon. He made a good effort, so did Almiron, of making sure that they were supporting those fullbacks. You can see that through their heat maps, really getting back, tracking back. Gordon was everywhere down this side. And then we can have a look at Almiron as well. That was Lewis Hall. Almiron gets back as well. I mean, most of Almiron's heat is around just behind the centre circle, just behind the halfway line, next to Kieran Trippier, who also did a number of good interceptions himself. Let's contrast that with the Manchester City side, because as I have mentioned, Kyle Walker and Gvardiol got really aggressive in this game to try and pin back those Newcastle wingers. Obviously, Pep Guardiola was cautious about the counter-attack, but in doing that and in committing those fullbacks, what actually happened is left so much space in behind, and Newcastle managed to exploit that on a number of occasions. In fact, utilising the space in behind where Walker left, it was actually the lead up to both Newcastle goals. We'll be going through them a little bit later, so stay tuned for that. But really, Diaz and Ake were left in no man's land a lot of the time. Rodri going forwards, especially when Newcastle pegged one back, they managed to create some good attacking opportunities, obviously created some shots, but I thought Newcastle dealt with it really well for a certain period of time. It was only into the latter stages of the second half that Newcastle really started to drop off, and if we have a look at some of the stats, I was extremely impressed with the way that Newcastle played and the way that Newcastle defended. 27% possession, they're used to having more of the ball, 12 shots, 5 on target, Man City obviously dominating a lot of the stats, but overall I thought Newcastle were well worth the point that they were aiming to go for. 3 big chances missed for them as well, utilising Isak's pace, utilising Gordon's pace and their ability to play on the transition after absorbing so much of that pressure. It was very, very good. Obviously, they won more duels, 44 duels won to Man City's 38. They won more aerial duels, they had a better presence, their height and physicality really helping them through. And overall, I thought it was a pretty fantastic game from them. Although they lost the match due to some Kevin De Bruyne brilliance, any team can do that. I want to focus as well on the missing players that they had. This is one of the major points that I've got to just highlight here, because yes, they did lose a lot of momentum and a lot of energy in the second half, and that's where the Man City goals came from. But if you look at their bench, no disrespect to the people who are actually on it, but who do you bring on to really start to change things? Lewis Hall came on for Anthony Gordon to try and shore up that defence. Gordon was shattered. Is it going to be asking too much of Ben Parkinson to try and come and do something? I think so. Paul Dummett isn't really going to add too much. Neither is Lascelles. Matt Ritchie is past it, unfortunately. Karius is a goalkeeper, and you just have very little options, and that's where it makes me turn towards the likes of the missing plays that they had. The Elliot Anderson could have played, Harvey Barnes. Then you look at Nick Pope, their first choice goalkeeper. Matt Targett could have been an option instead of Dan Burn. Joe Willock, Callum Wilson, Joe Linton, Sandro Tonali is unable to play. These are key and crucial players that are not available to Newcastle, and with them back would have seen them get better energy, better quality, and probably enough strength, steel and resilience to be able to see this game through, or at least give them a better chance. So with those players, or without those players I should say, it just became that little bit too much. Botman and Cher have been out as well, and what I'm trying to say is that with the players back, with the lack of European football, with the ability for Eddie Howe to concentrate on one game a week, making sure that his side is prepped, prepared and ready to go again, I think Newcastle will be absolutely fine. The shoots, or the green shoots that I saw in this game, the resilience, the heart, the desire, the hunger from every player, but in particular Lewis Miley, Bruno Guimaraes and Sean Longstaff was fantastic. The quality is there in Alexander Isak and Anthony Gordon, who finished their chances brilliantly. Almiron is always working very, very hard, and I thought he did a very good job of making sure he was the main tackler, the presser, the real aggressor when it comes to attacking this Manchester City side. This has been very much about Newcastle, but this is a Newcastle video. Man City were flawless, to a point. They weren't exactly flawless, but they were fantastic once Kevin De Bruyne came on the pitch. He was just a game changer. He allowed them to really dominate the ball, really utilising those clear-cut opportunities and taking them when they needed to. I mean, the pass over to Oscar Bob was fantastic, and his goal was obviously pretty brilliant. With Kevin De Bruyne, Man City are a completely different side. Without them, Newcastle looked quite comfortable. And I'm not surprised that Pep Guardiola turned to Kevin De Bruyne, a fresh Kevin De Bruyne who has just come back from injury. I'm not surprised that he turned to them, because Man City was struggling, and it didn't look like they were going to find an answer without help from the bench, something that Newcastle did not really have access to. I was just extremely impressed with Newcastle, and it gives me the belief that they will be absolutely fine going forwards in the Premier League. Just proves that European football was a little bit too much for them with the stretched squad that they had, but they generally did okay, and I'm sure they'll be absolutely fine. And before we end, let's have a look at the Newcastle goals. It's these goals and the quality in these goals that really give me the assurance that Newcastle will be absolutely fine going into the rest of the Premier League campaign without the European distraction and with players coming back from injury. I'm not a Newcastle fan, but what I would tell Newcastle fans is that they'll be fine. They'll be okay. And it's the quality that they show in these moments that really give me that sense. Let's focus on the first goal. The ball is about to come into Bruno Guimaraes, and before he plays that pass over the top to Alexander Isak, I want to focus on Manchester City for a second. The transitional game was something Newcastle utilised in both of their goals. Bernardo Silva is currently out of position in the centre midfield role. Kyle Walker is actually out of position just in the centre of the pitch. Ruben Diaz and Rodri are actually the two main centre backs. Ake and Gvardiol are out on this left hand side. So like I said, they're all over the place. The transitional game was huge, and it's something that Newcastle seriously utilised. The ball gets played into Bruno Guimaraes and it goes over the top. Let's forward just a little bit. Ball gets played, he's about to swing the ball and it goes over the top. It's now a running race between Kyle Walker and Alexander Isak. Isak gets to the ball first, but Kyle Walker stands him up. Isak has a drop of the shoulder, moves to the right hand side and curls it into the right hand side of the net. It was a fantastic finish, brilliantly executed, and it allowed Newcastle back into the match. Watch that Anthony Gordon is also there for the overlapping run, something that allowed Kyle Walker just to have that little bit of hesitation. He stopped for a moment instead of committing towards Alexander Isak, and it meant that Isak had that extra split second, half a second, to be able to take that shot and convert their chance. Let's now move on to the second goal. Here we have a little bit more unity, a bit more cohesion from the Man City side, but just watch how narrow Kyle Walker is here. He's currently in the centre circle. Remember, he is the right back for this Manchester City side, and he's currently in the middle of the pitch, aka the centre circle. Just keep that in your mind. Alexander Isak is currently playing the ball back. It moves over here to Dan Burn, who plays the ball through into Anthony Gordon, who makes a very good run down that left-hand channel. And just look at the amount of space that's currently being afforded to Anthony Gordon. He's just been left in no man's land yet again. Burn plays that pass pretty well weighted, and it allows Anthony Gordon on his bike. I mean, look at the space here. It is criminal. Again, this is Kyle Walker, this is Ruben Diaz, this is Ake, and this is Gvardiol. The line that was held by Manchester City was nowhere near good enough, and it allows Gordon so much space. Eddie Howe clearly identifying one of the weaknesses with this Manchester City backline and the commitment that they had and their lack of organisation. Ruben Diaz must be screaming at Kyle Walker to go and challenge Anthony Gordon right here, but he fails to do so. Anthony Gordon continues to run with the ball and enters the box. This is the first mistake that I think that Kyle Walker makes, allowing him to enter the box right here. Kyle Walker should be pressing, making sure that he's not able to continue his movement into the box, but he does. And that moment, Kyle Walker is currently on the back foot. He has to try and make a challenge. I don't think he gets close enough. Anthony Gordon makes a brilliant step towards the right hand side and then curls it into the goal. Again, another fantastic, brilliant finish, full of quality, pace, power, precision, everything you want from a strike, and Anthony Gordon finished pretty perfectly. It was an amazing goal, amazing play, and the transitional game, although it wasn't something that Newcastle utilised too much in the second half, the first half they proved they're still just as much of a danger as they ever have been. Brilliant game by Newcastle, perfectly orchestrated, perfectly executed, brilliant counterattacks, and like I said, it's these moments, the quality in these moments and the players that they have at their disposal that gives me the assurance to tell Newcastle United fans that they'll be alright. They'll be okay. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Let me know your thoughts and queries and theories about Newcastle United and where you think they're going to finish in the table. Let me know. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you ever so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learnt something new, and I hope to see you in the next one. But until then, my friends, take care.